Due to International Overdose Awareness Day being on Saturday, I decided to do some activities throughout the week. So we're starting off with this one. It's really just a presentation to talk about the stigma that substance users often face. A big thing that we've really been pushing for in the organization the last few months is increasing education around substance use so that it'll decrease stigma and discrimination. Sometimes stigma comes from just not knowing or not being up to date with the most recent information. So then with misinformation, that's where stigmatizing language and thoughts and things like that kind of come from. So we're starting with this presentation, the No More Stigma, No More Shame. And it's basically just the harm reduction approach to addressing the opioid crisis. Tomorrow night at 6 p.m., we are going to be having naloxone administration and overdose prevention kind of education training. I'm aiming for it to be about 2 hours long, so starting from 6 and being done around 8. It could go longer, it could be shorter, not 100% sure. It'll just all depend on how many people actually attend and how talkative the group is. That's that. On Thursday, we are going to be starting our silent memorial. So we've been collecting names of people that have passed away due to a substance use related issue. So like car accidents, suicides, endocarditis, things that can often be related back to substance use, and then also people that are that have passed away because of an overdose. So we have about 26, 27 names right now, and their names are going to be written on purple ribbon, and then on Thursday we'll be tying the ribbons around downtown Moncton, so in front of City Hall, along Main Street, possibly in Victoria Park. It'll all depend on how many names I actually get. So if you have names, feel free to send me a message. It doesn't even have to be their real name. It can be a nickname. I haven't been putting any last names for people that have put their names in. I'm just putting the first name. So just to keep everything kind of confidential and not outing the whole family or friends or what have you. So if you want to send a name, then feel free. You can even send it with the additional comments with the evaluation that's going to come up after this presentation. And then on Saturday, which is actually International Overdose Awareness Day, and it's the Pride Parade, we will be having a kiosk set up at the park after the Pride Parade. So come have a chat. We have an individual from the Mom Stop the Harm group. She'll be at the kiosk with me. So if you need some information around that, the Mom Stop the Harm group is a group that's been kind of building over the last couple of years, and it's moms and significant loved ones, I think, that have lost somebody to the opioid crisis. So she'll be there, and we'll be able to give you lots more information on that. Okay, so now we're just going to jump right into the presentation. So this is just a little survey. There's going to be questions come up on your screen. There is no right or wrong answer to any of these questions. It's just to kind of get you thinking about, some of the thoughts and ideas and things that we have around substance use, around this population of people that use drugs. And yeah, it's really just to get you thinking about kind of where your stance is. And once again, there's no right or wrong answers. I can't even see what everybody is answering. So, but I can see once somebody answers. So once everybody's answered, my bar will be at 100%. So then I'll know to close it. So our first poll question is, addiction is a. So is addiction a chronic health issue or a choice? Now you just select one and make sure that you push submit. And once again, there is no right or wrong answer to this question. So I have 73, 80% voted. There's still a couple of you that haven't picked or haven't decided what your thoughts are. So just another second. Okay. So that was the first poll. The next one. Although it is often hard to admit, I sometimes judge people who cannot stop using drugs. Okay, I have 60% voted, 67. Another 15 seconds to put your vote in. Okay. Our next question is, drinking alcohol is safer than snorting prescription Dilaudid? So I see that I'm continually getting 80% voted, so I guess there's a few of you that just don't want to vote on anything, which is totally cool. Okay, here's one. I'm a non-judgmental person. Okay. I trust someone who uses drugs as much as I trust someone who doesn't use drugs. Okay, we're at 73% voted. 15 seconds. Okay. If a woman is pregnant, she has the responsibility to stop taking drugs. Next one. When I see someone panhandling, which substance costs Canada the most? And this is costs as in the healthcare system, the corrections, accidents, loss of productivity, all of them combined. So which one costs Canadians the most? And the last question, you can't help someone that won't help themselves. Okay, so does anybody want to share their thoughts on if anything kind of like stirred up? Was there any question that was really difficult? Okay, so we'll just keep moving along. Oh, nice. We'll just keep moving here. So today we're going to talk about Ensemble. We're also going to talk about the needle distribution service or the harm reduction service. We're going to touch on opioid addiction, the opioid crisis, harm reduction practices, and then at the end we'll talk about the stigma that's often associated with substance use disorders. So Ensemble, we recently changed our name from AIDS Mountain to Ensemble because we realized that AIDS Mountain wasn't really capturing everything that we were doing. Oh, I have a hand raised. Sorry about that. Juanita. Yes.
Oh, I was just going to type. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I had a question when we were doing the survey about the questions, but now we moved on, so it's not important now.
Oh, okay.
Okay, that's all right.
Okay, so when AIDS Mountain originally opened, it was when the AIDS epidemic was kind of more in full swing, and people really needed the support and kind of help with directing them into health services and things like that. So that's why the AIDS organizations kind of started up, and now it's kind of a joke because it's almost like we've worked ourselves out of a job. We still support people living with HIV. Our clientele, though, the number has just greatly decreased because due to like medications and things like that, it's much easier to live a happy, healthy, more fulfilling life with while you're living with HIV. So we really focus now on the LGBTQ plus youth and the people who use people with the drug dependence or people who use drugs. So our Safe Spaces program, which is the program that focuses on LGBTQ youth, it has a drop-in for youth every Tuesday evening through the school year. If anybody is interested in more information on that, Catherine's contact information will be sent with the evaluation. If not, you can definitely send an email or a comment with the evaluation. Not only does she do that, but she also goes into schools and organizations to talk about gender diversity and sexual orientation. She also does an ally training, which is a super great tool, I think, as frontline service providers, that we all have that knowledge in that training, just so that we can help to better work with that population. And then we have the needle distribution service. So I operate the needle distribution service. We operate under a harm reduction approach. So basically we recognize that substance use is going to happen, regardless of if we're here, regardless of if methadone is around, regardless of anything, substance use is going to continue to happen. It's been around forever and it's going to continue to be around. So we give people the tools and the equipment that they need in order to inject safer, to decrease the amount of sharing of equipment, so that also in turn decreases sexually transmitted and bloodborne infections as well. So we have, as you can see in the picture, needles, we have alcohol swabs, little cotton filters, cookers so that they're not using spoons, tourniquets, vitamin C. People are typically using vinegar and lemon juice, that kind of stuff, to break down crack in order to inject it, because obviously crack is a solid, and in order to inject it needs to be a liquid. So we hand out vitamin C. So you have the acid and then the crack is the base, and together the vitamin C dissolves it. There is no picture. Interesting. There, is that better? Sorry about that. As well as coordinating the needle distribution service, I do the naloxone administration training. So the other picture in this post is what a naloxone kit actually looks like. The naloxone kit is for opioid overdoses, and it temporarily reverses the effects of the opioids that an individual takes. Then I also have a safe needle handling and disposal presentation as well, just going over how to properly pick up a needle that has been found in the community or in a bathroom or in a hospital. And then I talk about the transmission risks, and just kind of debunk some of the myths also around discarded needles. We do overdose prevention with clients, as well as families and family members and friends of people that use. We also have a support group for people affected by loved one substance use. So that's not just closed to like moms, dads. It's open to everybody. We're hoping to start back up in September. And if you want more information on that, then definitely reach out and let me know. So, who loves to do Mythbusters? Like I said earlier, I find that a lot of the stigma and kind of negative attitudes towards people that use drugs often come from misinformation or myths. And maybe some of the information that you have was accurate 15, 20 years ago, but with, you know, science and studies and things like that, maybe that might not be as accurate today as it was then. So this is going to be launched as a test, which will kind of work like the poll, but basically a list of questions are going to come up on your screen, and then you'll just pick the true or false. Once again, I can't see who picks what, so. Hey, Lisa. So yeah, you're just going to do these tests. You'll fill this out, and you haven't really missed a whole lot. We just kind of went over what the reason behind why I'm doing this presentation, and the presentation's coming. I'm also recording this, so anybody that missed the beginning of it, you can go back and watch it later. So I have about half of you that have submitted your test or your true or false. So I'll give everybody about another 30 seconds to finish up with that. Okay. So some of the myth busters that we'll go over now. So this is just a video that is going to talk about what exactly kind of happens to your body and where the opioid addiction will often stem from. I constantly have people coming in telling us, you know, that they originally started taking opiates because of a surgery or because of an accident or what have you, for whatever reason, and then unfortunately a lot of people get hooked, and there isn't really a whole lot of follow-up with kind of weaning people back off of the opiates. Typically they're just like, okay, you're done. So this presentation or this video is just a little cartoon thing that will talk about an individual that has that is the reason that they struggle with opiates.
So her her doctor prescribes an opioid. This is Susan. Susan loves to bike. While out for a ride, she falls and breaks her arm. Special cells called neurons send a signal through the spinal cord to the brain, which interprets the signal as pain. Susan understands that pain means she needs to go to the hospital, and her body is equipped for survival, helping her not to panic so she can seek help. Many of her neurons are covered in proteins called opioid receptors. These receptors act like a brake to slow down the neuron's ability to send pain signals. When injured, the body releases natural painkillers called endorphins. Like a key in a lock, endorphins activate opioid receptors, slowing down the pain signal and preventing a panic. Susan gets treated for the broken bone, but 3 months later, her arm still hurts. And now that pain is making her feel depressed and anxious. So her doctor prescribes an opioid painkiller. There are many different opioids, but they all share a chemical similarity to our own endorphins. This allows them to bind to the same opioid receptors and stop pain signals. But that's not all they do. Deep inside Susan's brain is a region called the ventral tegmental area, or VTA for short. VTA is full of neurons that produce a chemical called dopamine. When something good happens, dopamine is released, giving Susan a feeling of pleasure. This helps teach her brain to keep seeking out good things. To keep dopamine neurons in check, inhibitory neurons keep the brakes on until something good comes along. Just like the pain neurons, these neurons are covered in opioid receptors. When Susan takes the painkiller prescribed by her doctor, the opioid receptors turn off the inhibitory neurons and release the brake on the dopamine neurons. The rush of dopamine temporarily eliminates Susan's depression and anxiety, and she feels relief, calmness, and even euphoria. As Susan continues to take the painkillers, her brain responds by trying to regain its balance. Her inhibitory neurons work extra hard, even when the opioid receptors are activated, and it becomes harder and harder for her dopamine neurons to release dopamine. Susan finds that she needs to increase her dose of painkillers in order to feel comfortable. This is called tolerance. Eventually, Susan's pills run out. Inhibitory neurons that had been working overtime were loosed, clamping down on dopamine neurons and shutting them off almost completely. Now, not only is Susan in pain, but the depression and anxiety come back. On top of that, Susan feels ravaged by an inescapable physical sickness far worse than any flu. Susan's body is going through withdrawal. Most people who take opioids for a long time tend to experience some withdrawal, but they can still stop taking the pills and return to normal. But for people like Susan, it's not so easy. Her genetics and the environment she grew up in put her at a higher risk for addiction. Her withdrawal symptoms aren't just unpleasant, they're unbearable. Susan thinks the only way to feel normal is to find more opioids. And this is how the cycle of opioid addiction emerges, driven by a brain trying to regain its balance. But there is hope for Susan. Though the road to recovery can be challenging and there may be setbacks, treatment can retrain Susan's brain. With the help of medication and therapy, Susan finds pleasure in her life once again.
Okay, so I know that I was getting some messages back and forth that the audio wasn't that great. So what I'll do is I'll send the link out to the people that participated. It is called Susan's Brain, or This is What Happens to Your Brain on Opioids. So if you want to check that out later, you definitely can. So that kind of in a nutshell is how opioids kind of affect the brain. because it isn't just so much as somebody really wanting to do it, but instead it's somebody that their brain gets rewired, and that's where the addiction really comes from, and that's what makes it difficult for it to just stop. So here is an infographic from Ambulance New Brunswick on the opioid crisis in Canada. So these are numbers from 2018. Unfortunately, I have to share numbers that obviously aren't real time. A lot of the reports and infographics come from the year before. So from January to September 2018, so this wasn't even including the last quarter, there was 3,000 apparent opioid related deaths. That is a decrease from the whole 2017 year, which is nice. And if you look down in where New Brunswick is on the map, we had 19 overdose deaths as opposed to 35 that we had in 2017. And even the numbers over in BC have also decreased in the 2018 year. There's a lot of articles and things like that really kind of back up the fact that these numbers are lower is because the naloxone became more readily available to individuals. These two charts also break down the distribution and the amount of time that people were responding to the naloxone. So this is another chart from Ambulance New Brunswick. If I didn't mention that before, the blue ones are the amount of times that people visited the emergency department. So they were accidental overdose cases. You can see in 2017, those bars are much, much higher than in 2018. And that's also just New Brunswick numbers. And then New Brunswick numbers with the red and the blue chart, the red is the amount of times that patients were given the naloxone, and then the amount of times that somebody responded to it. So as you can see, the bars, they were pretty steady, and then in 2018 they dropped a bit, and then they came back up. When I was showing this graph over like a 4-year span, the numbers were just like slowly increasing, and then all of a sudden there was a huge spike in 2017. This could be for a number of reasons. First one being that the Ambulance New Brunswick actually expanded their protocol around administering naloxone, so they were giving it to people more often at a higher dose, more frequently. They weren't waiting as long. So not necessarily those individuals in years before 2017, those numbers don't necessarily mean that amount of people weren't overdosing then. Naloxone just wasn't being given as often. And once you're able to compare 2017 numbers to 2018 numbers, it really starts to balance out, if not drop a bit more. So I think that really backs up the reason for the spike being that the naloxone protocols were changed, because really people have been dying from opioid overdoses forever. It's not just something that magically happened, just like naloxone didn't just magically fall out of the sky. It's been around for years. But of course, when the fentanyl really hit in BC, then that's when people really started to die from it. As of right now, people just assume that there's fentanyl in everything, or that's at least what we encourage people to think, is that like it's not maybe I have fentanyl in my drug, it's I have fentanyl in my drug, I'm not sure how much. When I was in Alberta, I was able to volunteer in an overdose prevention site, and we were actually testing we could actually use fentanyl testing strips to test the drugs that people were injecting, and we had no drugs come through that didn't actually have fentanyl in it. So even the heroin that was coming right from BC, don't ask me how it got there, but the people that were supposedly injecting just heroin, there was fentanyl in that. And a lot of people that I got to talk to from BC, they said that, you know, there really isn't much for pure heroin anymore. It's really hard to come across. It's pretty well all just fentanyl. Another thing that this also records, these numbers, is like accidental prescription overdose deaths as well. Those are lumped in there. So I'm just gonna take a little break here. If anybody needs to use the washroom, get a drink, I know that it was kind of a slow startup, but we're just gonna take a couple minutes just to I'm gonna regroup, and yeah, check out some of the technical things. We're just gonna be about 5 minutes, and then we're going to start back up again. So see you then. Right. So is everybody back? Okay, so moving on, we're going to do another Mythbusters. So this one is going to be focused around harm reduction and harm reduction practices. I'll give you about 2.5, 3 minutes to complete this. So we have half of them submitted. About another 30 seconds. Okay. So we're going to close this test. Okay, so does anybody have any questions, comments about that? Please raise your hand, use your little icon there. Okay. So, why are we called a distribution and not an exchange? When needle programs first started, the idea, of course, was to decrease the amount of sharing and reusing equipment. So when sharing was happening, a lot more people were contracting Hep C, HIV. Oh, I would love.
Sorry, Abby, I was chatting with somebody else and that accidentally went. But I have nothing to hide. I have a daughter who is active, so that was accidentally sent to the group instead of to one individual.
No worries. So that's how the needle programs kind of started. And then after doing some research and looking into the outcomes and things, they realized that when they were doing exchanges and had strict guidelines around the 1-for-1, so bring a needle in to get a new one, it was actually increasing the amount of sharing that was happening and reusing of old supplies. So it was really reducing the effectiveness of the program. It really wasn't getting to where they wanted it to be. I find that a lot of our clients that access the service that are in like their 40s-ish, a lot of them talk about how the reason they contracted hepatitis C was when the needle programs first started and it was the strict 1-for-1. They were using just kind of whatever needle they could that was free. One individual, he lived 2 hours away from the district or the exchange, and they would only give 5 needles at a time. So he didn't have his license, he didn't have a vehicle, so he was just constantly reusing his, and maybe his buddy just came back from the exchange and his needle's a little sharper, so he was using that. So that's why we go by a distribution now, which is kind of giving people the amount of supplies that they need. Now, that being said, it's not like a pinata and like needles just falling out of the sky. Everybody's supplies, I guess, is kind of tailored to their situation. So after being here, I know who is on the street and they're coming in 2 or 3 or 4 times a week. So they're not even asking for a lot of needles because they don't have a home to go to, they don't want to carry around the same amount of needles that the person that is going home and lives 2 hours away. They don't want that amount of needles. So everybody's numbers are kind of tailored around their situation. We have a 85% return rate this year. It did go down some from last year, but we had all of the new drop boxes installed. I encourage a lot more people to even just use public washroom sharps containers for their 1 or 2 or 3. Obviously, they can't take a large amount, but they can definitely take 2 or 3, and you can find sharps containers in just about every public washroom. So I encourage that. Our friends that go up to Elsie, they have a drop box up there as well that gets used quite often. So people are dropping their needles off in there as well. I think that I put the resource in the materials, but if I didn't, the kind of like to know if your needle distribution or whatever is being effective is if you have like an 80% to like a 92, 93% return rate, which we are still in that, in those numbers. And also the majority, I don't know of any, and feel free to reach out and let me know if I am mistaken, but I don't know of any needle program that still operates as a strict one-for-one exchange, like across Canada. A lot of us all work as a distribution. I know that Fredericton and St. John, they call themselves the Needle Exchange, but we're sister organizations and we actually operate the exact same way. So their theories or practices, I guess, are the same as ours. So they're giving what they need to give, even though they are called an exchange. So does anybody have any like questions about that, or did anybody like know that or kind of know the history behind it? So these are an individual's arms. So this is part of the reason why we do harm reduction, and this is a real success story for us, for our organization. So basically this individual was going to lose both of his arms from injecting cocaine. When we started giving out safer inhalation kits, he was able to stop injecting because he wasn't ready or able to give up his cocaine addiction. So in order to save his arms from being amputated, because as you can see, they were in pretty rough shape and, you know, right down into the meat of things. Once he started smoking crack, he was able to leave his arms alone and give them a chance to heal up. So that to us is a huge success, and it really goes with the principles of harm reduction, because one of the principles is we understand that the quality of life and any decrease in drug-related harms is a success. So obviously this was a decreased harm, because although he was still smoking crack, he wasn't injecting. So now he still has his two hands, and that's a really great thing, obviously. Does anybody know why individuals can't reuse their own needle? So once I inject, I'm not supposed to, and we don't encourage people to reuse their own needle. Does anybody know why? Lisa, because they get barbed at the end. Excellent. That is exactly why. We do not tell people that are diabetic to reuse their needles, and they're the exact same needle. It is an insulin syringe or an insulin needle that we give out to individuals, and they dull after so many uses. Not only that, they get, you know, contaminated. There are the elements, things like that. But this is actually what the needle actually starts to look like after you've used it more than once, and even up to 6, 7 times. And people unfortunately do that. And this would happen more often if we weren't giving out what they needed. If we weren't meeting their not demands, but what they really needed. So as you can see, it starts to actually like hook, like there's a hook at the end. So imagine trying to get that into your vein and then taking it out again. Can anybody tell me what all of these things have in common? What are these things? Oh, good. I'm loving all of the answers, and that is correct. These are all harm reduction tools. So in our daily lives, our everyday life, we are encouraged, and in some cases, it's a law to abide by and to put into practice using these harm reduction tools. So we have to wear seatbelts. I mean, some people still don't, but obviously there's a huge risk in being in a motor vehicle. There's a huge risk in getting in a car accident. So we are constantly putting our seatbelts on to reduce the risk and reduce the harms if we happen to be in an accident. We put our children in car seats so that if we happen to be in an accident, the risks are reduced. Birth control and condoms, they prevent unplanned pregnancies. We reduce the risk and the chances of contracting sexually transmitted infections. We're wearing helmets to protect our head while we're riding our bikes or skateboarding. Nicorette gum. People are encouraged to stop smoking cigarettes and to chew Nicorette gum or to use the patch. I actually overheard a client and their loved one, I guess, the loved one told the individual that he would never give her money for cigarettes or drugs, but he would buy her Nicorette gum if that's what if that's what she decided she wanted to do. NB liquor. So the liquor store is a harm reduction practice. Does anybody know why? Or does anybody want to take a guess at why? So while the liquor store oh, Lisa, wow, you're right on top of it. Because moonshine is wild. Yes, it is. So liquor stores, when you go into a liquor store and you want a bottle of wine or you want a beer or you want whatever, which are all still drugs, when you go in that store, you know exactly what's in that can or that bottle. So it's reducing the risks of alcohol poisoning, things like that. Same with the methadone clinic. The methadone clinic is giving out a pure drug. When people go to the methadone clinic, they know exactly what they're getting. Just like when I go to the superstore and I buy Benadryl, well, the ingredients are listed on the back. What really causes things to be dangerous and what really causes illicit drugs to be kind of dangerous and scary is the fact that it's not monitored, and there's really nowhere for you to go to purchase these drugs in their pure form, in what they're supposed to be. When you're buying stuff off the black market, it doesn't come with a ingredients label. It doesn't come with a nutritional label and of how much MDMA is in this and how much fentanyl is in this. And that's really where we get to the dangers of illicit drugs. When you think of heroin and cocaine and ecstasy, methamphetamines, yeah, they're scary when we first think about them, but the scary thing is that we have to buy them off the street. And I'm not saying like me personally, but our clients are going out and buying these things off the street because they can't just go to the liquor store. Now we have the Cannabis New Brunswick, same type of thing. Now that it's monitored, when people go in and buy marijuana, they know what they're buying. And another harm reduction tool, I guess, is obviously healthy fruits and vegetables. Like, we're constantly encouraged to eat healthy, exercise, because all of those things reduce the risk of high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart attack, obesity, all of these things. We are encouraged to partake in these practices to reduce the risks. So, as I've outlined, while harm reduction practices are widely encouraged, and in some cases even law, for some reason when it comes to substance use, and even only certain substances, somebody could chew Nicorette gum for 30 years and, they're still going to be praised for quitting smoking. They're not going to be, it's not going to be oh, well, you replace one drug for another. It's going to be, yeah, that's great. I'm so happy for you. But unfortunately, when individuals are finally on methadone or are finally on Suboxone, once they're on that, for some reason we have this conception that, well, you're only supposed to be on it for 2 or 3 months and then you're supposed to be able to get off of it. Well, that obviously isn't just the case. Just because you eat healthy for a month doesn't mean that the rest of your life you're set, you're never going to become overweight, you're never going to have high cholesterol. It needs to be a continuous thing. Now, not saying that in so many years after you've dealt with traumas that often led to addiction, found different coping strategies, are exercising, maybe because of methadone, you're able to go to work, you're able to keep your housing, you're able to look after your kids. Well, eventually you'll get to a place, well, maybe you won't actually need it, but for society to be continually telling individuals that, well, you've been on this for 3 months and you just replaced one drug with the next, it's super contradictory. They're doing better after 3 months because of their medication. So people that struggle with anxiety, depression, even those types of things, when I first became medicated for my mental health, I was struggling a lot. Well, the last few months, I finally got to a dose where, I'm functioning. I'm able to, well, actually, I'm doing more than functioning. I'm, keeping my house clean. I'm coming to work every day. I'm just happier. But that doesn't mean that now that I'm finally here, I'm going to just stop taking my anxiety medication. I'm going to continue to take my anxiety medication because that's what's kind of fitting that extra piece or that missing piece for me to continue to come to work or to just participate in my life. So does that make sense? Like, is there any questions, thoughts around that? Anybody? And I mean, you can unmute as well if you want to talk instead of just type. Okay. Oh, do I have a comment? All is good. Awesome. Thanks, Muriel. I'm glad to hear. Okay, so insight. You rock. Thank you, Paul. Insight. So Insight was Canada's first legal supervised consumption site. And as you can see on the screen, it opened in 2003. There was a lot of pushback and a lot of fight because of this site and this program. It really wasn't widely accepted because, oh my God, people are going there to inject illegal drugs, basically. The bonus of this is that there has never been a death ever in an overdose prevention site or a supervised consumption site. ever. These sites have people overdose in them? Yes, 100%, probably hourly. But what's happening is they're not using alone. They're not using by themselves. People see them drop, and as soon as they see them drop, they're able to administer the naloxone, start CPR, call the ambulance, all of those safety measures. And that's why not only do we need needle distributions, but we also need these supervised consumption sites now. The majority of individuals that actually die from an overdose, they're by themselves. They end up using it in their homes, under a bridge, in an alleyway, by themselves. And that's when, and nobody is there to revive them, basically, or nobody even finds them until it's too late. While people often think that these sites will encourage, substance use, and young people are going to want to start injecting, well, this is just my point of view. I sit around all the new equipment that I could possibly need to inject, and I see a lot of dealers in the run of my day, and not once does it ever occur to me that I should start injecting crystal meth, or I should start injecting Dilaudid. If people aren't going to do something, they're just not going to do something. When a bar opens up, that nobody's first thought is, well, this bar is going to encourage people to start drinking more, and we're going to have a whole bunch more people that are addicted to alcohol, and they're struggling with alcohol, and so on and so forth. A bar is a supervised consumption site. You're just consuming a legal drug as opposed to an illegal drug. You can go to your favorite supervised consumption site, whether that's the old Triangle, whether that's Dooley's, Pizza Delight, any bar. You can go to those places, you can order a beer, and that beer is going to come out and it's going to be that beer. Now, of course, all of the date rape drugs are a whole other story. But when you go and get this drug, you know what you're consuming, as opposed to an individual that gets a drug and then goes to inject it or smoke it or snort it, and they bought it from Jimmy off the street. They don't know what's in it. And that's where the issues really come from. Okay, so we got a chat. I see on Facebook that there are several groups which go around and pick up contaminated needles which have been found by citizens in the city. They do seem to advocate for facilities like this one. Yeah, definitely. And of course they reduce the syringes that are found out on the street as well, because people are able to just come in and use. And a lot of people that access these services are individuals that are homeless and that they do have to use outside of, they have to really work to try to find somewhere that they can actually use. Especially with all like the black lights and things like that people are starting to install in public washrooms, that makes it really difficult for individuals to inject. So then that's why they end up injecting on the side of the road. Now, that being said, I've never once seen anybody injecting on the side of the road. I understand that it does happen. But that's where these things, as the slide says, it brings stability into the community. When is Moncton getting a supervised injection site? That's a great question. I'm not sure anybody has the answer to that. So with supervised injection sites, if I could just hang a sign on the door that said, come inject here, then, that would make the world such a better place. But you actually have to apply for an exemption to open a supervised consumption place or a supervised injection site, because if you don't, the cops can come in and charge everybody with trafficking and possession. Now, I love all of my friends dearly that come in to see me. However, I'm not getting a criminal record for them. I do know that that it is in the works, that it's being discussed. And I know that eventually we're pushing for it to actually happen, but unfortunately, being in New Brunswick, things kind of move a little slower. But on a more positive note, Halifax is a few steps ahead of us, and they are also working very hard to open the first injection site in Atlantic Canada, because right now we don't have any past Montreal. So I know that doesn't really answer your question, but I don't have a date or even an idea as to when a supervised consumption site or a supervised injection site will be here. So does anybody else have any other questions about supervised injection sites, supervised consumption sites, overdose prevention sites? So what's really cool about Insight is they started as a pilot project. I think they were given funding for 2 years, and then the Harper government wanted to shut them down. They super weren't for that, and it ended up actually going to like the Supreme Court of Canada to keep this supervised injection site open. And a lot of the people that are actually running the supervised injection site are our peers. So people that used to inject themselves, people that struggled with addiction, community workers, and Insight also has housing. They also have, detox. They have everything all in one building. Of course, that would be absolutely wonderful for us to have here. But, it's nice to just dream sometimes. Okay, so we have been half an hour. So just so that we keep going because of time, I'm going to skip this break if everybody's all right with that. Okay. Here we go. I love when this happens. Okay, so this is an activity that will probably make people uncomfortable. It could also be triggering as well. But basically what this is going to do is it's going to give you scenarios. It's going to be a test. And once again, there's no right or wrong answers to it. But I'm going to give a test, and you're going to kind of write your thoughts on each scenario. Yeah, I guess it's really just to, it is to make you uncomfortable and to see kind of how ridiculous some thoughts are towards drugs compared to other accepted issues, I guess you could say. So I'll give people like 3 to 5 minutes to do this, just because there is some typing. Once again, there's no right answers, but these are all situations that if you take it, the everyday situation that are in these scenarios have happened to clients or that I've read about. So while you're typing, giving your thoughts, if you finish, then definitely take your break then. I am going to step out for a minute while you all do this. So here we go. So I see that there has been a few people submit. I'm just wondering if anyone else, I know that this is actually like a kind of a challenging activity. So I'm just wondering, it has been 5 minutes. So are more people working on answering the questions or, okay, still working on it. Okay, are we good? Are people still writing? Okay, so I'm going to end it. I see that about 3/4 of you. Okay. So I'm going to see if we can have a bit of discussion around that. You, everyone. So I want to hear people's thoughts. Yeah, just some feedback around some of the questions. None? Lisa got angry. Did anyone else get angry? Yeah, so Melissa's mother is a lung cancer survivor, and one of the first questions she's always asked is, were you a smoker? This is so frustrating and stereotypical. Muriel, a reminder of how we treat physical and mental issues differently. Yeah, definitely. We continue, yeah. Does anybody want to chat and kind of discuss what they're thinking without typing? Lisa, what was it about it that made you angry, or was there one that stood out to you more than others? I think the Hep C one at the end. Yeah, so when a liver is, I think it's like when two young men are in liver failure, and one is because of Hep C, and the other one is because of fatty non-alcoholic syndrome. I can't remember what the what the actual wording is, but which one needs it or who should get the first one. When in reality, yeah, they both need it, and really one isn't more important or less important than the other. I think my favorite one was the car accident one, when somebody's on their way to work and they're in a car accident, and the paramedics, I think, or the first responders, like, aren't going to treat them because they chose to get in a vehicle. That really goes back to the addiction being a choice, or a chronic health issue. We make choices as humans every single day that could have negative impacts on us. Whether that is driving to work. I know very well how dangerous it is to drive to work. For a while, I was driving, well, not for a while, for almost 2 years, I traveled 45 minutes to and from work. And really, that's dangerous through the winter. And of course, you can keep your precautions. You could be the best driver in the world, but things happen. But I never thought that anything negative would happen to me, just like the rest of us. None of us ever think that something negative is going to happen to us or our loved one. It just happens. Whether that be, smoking a cigarette or having a drink, who's to say that although I knew the impact, although I knew the risks of drinking, it didn't stop me from sneaking into my parents' liquor cabinet when I was 14, 15 to drink. Who's to say that couldn't have been what triggered my addiction? Somebody that smokes their first cigarette, who's to say that cigarette's the one that's going to start an addiction compared to maybe 20 cigarettes down the road? Maybe you are able to casually smoke when you drink or in a stressful situation, but you don't know which one, which cigarette, which drink could lead you down a very dark path. So I think it's really, really unfair. Sure, the individual chooses the first time that they use, but nobody chooses to become addicted to things. It's not a pleasant thing, and individuals know that. It's not a pleasant situation that they get into. They didn't wake up. They didn't dream when they were younger. When I grow up, I want to be addicted to crystal meth and be living on the street. That's nobody's goal, and that's not what people strive to do. But things happen, and typically you don't just start off with crystal meth or heroin or cocaine or any of that. You start off with the small cigarettes, alcohol, marijuana, and I know marijuana is a whole other debate as to whether that's a gateway drug or so on and so forth. Personally, I really believe that alcohol is the real gateway drug, because when you think about it, how many of us, when we tried, what was your first drug that you tried? And for a lot of people, it's alcohol, because you just drink it, as opposed to cigarettes and marijuana. You're smoking it, so the smoking has a bit more of a risk to it that some people may not be willing to take, as opposed to just drinking alcohol. Well, just drinking isn't as scary. So that's why when I talk about marijuana being kind of like a beginning, is because sometimes it'll bring you into a group of people that are doing more things. As well, people that, just do they start with snorting speed or Percocets, just these mild things. Well, speed is methamphetamine. Percocet is an opiate. So although they seem harmless at a party, that's typically where a lot of things start. I hope that makes sense. I really feel like I'm jumping all over the place, and once again, I apologize for that. It's just not seeing people. It doesn't feel like a real presentation. Okay, so who wants to give me a definition for stigma? To shame someone for their circumstances? Yeah. Ooh, this is a big one. I felt that. Putting everyone in a situation in the same box. Yep. So stigma is, I can't remember which resource I got that. I don't know if it's Webster's Dictionary or whatever, but I can't remember what the citation is for this specific definition, but for the most part, it's pretty well the same. So the negative attitudes and negative behaviors towards people with substance use and mental health problems, or just in general. And stigma includes having fixed ideas and judgments and fearing and avoiding what we don't understand. So like I said earlier, a lot of stigma and a lot of negative thoughts and comments often come from not understanding or being misinformed. So it's important for us as not only service providers to see to the needs of individuals that are accessing our services, but really reaching out beyond that and educating. Now we're going to just talk about the 4 forms of stigma. So stigma from individuals often occurs when individuals or the public develop and sustain negative stereotypes and assumptions about individuals. It can be verbal or physical. Can anybody give me a drug-related example to this type of stigma? So we have some examples. Assuming people who use drugs are criminals, lazy, violent. All homeless individuals use drugs. Oh wow, Lisa's jumping right ahead. Okay, so healthcare stigma from individuals, healthcare providers, assuming someone on methadone is just drug seeking. People not wanting to touch people with HIV. When people lock up their valuables when someone who uses drugs comes to visit. So that's all stigma from individuals. Institutional stigma. Institutional stigma occurs when assumptions and stereotypes are translated into public policy, practice, and funding decisions. So, criminal record checks for getting jobs. Bathroom policies that exclude transgender individuals. Can anyone else give some other examples? Okay, and self-stigma or internalized stigma occurs when individuals believe and adopt negative stereotypes and assumptions about themselves. People with learning disabilities believing they're stupid. People with HIV blaming themselves for their illness. I'm not strong enough. I don't deserve this. I don't deserve a good life. Yeah, I am weak. All of those things, all those ideas come from stigma, of course, typically external stigma. And when you stop and think about it, if I were to think those things about myself, obviously, and people that struggle with depression and anxiety will understand that once you start thinking those things, it's really hard to stop thinking that way, regardless of how hard you try. Often, that's kind of what keeps you in bed, or that's what keeps you going to the liquor cabinet, or that's what keeps getting you to smoke crack. It's when we have these negative thoughts about ourselves. And then there's stigma by association. So it occurs when assumptions and stereotypes are made based on association with stigmatized groups, individuals. So I'm often blamed for enabling individuals, and that I am encouraging substance use. Anybody that knew me before I started working knew that I was 100% against all substance use. Well, pause, actually, illegal substance use. I guess that just came with the lack of information and education that I had. But I definitely wasn't one to be initiating the substance use in groups. But it's funny now where I am, where I'm working, what I'm doing, and then that's now even people that I went to high school with are now all of a sudden she was so against drugs, now she doesn't try to get people off, so on and so forth, which obviously isn't true. People that go to the Pride Parade or take part in the activities, they often get labeled as LGBTQ individuals as well, just because they're partaking in those situations. Not situations, sorry, activities. So another thing that plays very heavily into stigma, of course, is the language and names and things that we use. And oftentimes we won't use language maliciously, even today in some of the comments, some of the names and labels that people were given, they're not my favorite, but the reason that they're not my favorite is because of the negative feelings and thoughts that come behind it, and that when people are using these words, they are often using it to shame somebody or judging somebody. The thoughts that come to our minds, we should all have a filter. Yeah, definitely. And filters obviously don't come as easily to some people. I still struggle with certain labels, with certain things that I say, because I am human, but it's important to stop and catch yourself, or like have somebody stopping you and catching you when you say these things and calling you out on them. Because if you don't catch yourself, or if you don't mentally correct yourself, or even verbally correct yourself, nothing's going to change. There's no rewiring that's going to happen. But it's really unfortunate when people label themselves as these things, and then even if these are part of who they are, they think less of themselves. If you had to pick one of these labels, which one would you be all right with wearing? Which one of these labels would you like to wear? Nobody? Yeah, it's definitely, these aren't things that people want to. Now, if I would have put words like a doctor or a lawyer or a teacher, we would be quicker to jump onto those, as opposed to some of these negative, obviously these negative labels. They're all so hurtful. And yeah, they really are. And another thing too is we have no idea who around us has a loved one that's struggling with substances, or has to work the streets to support herself or himself. So just because you're shooting the shit with somebody, and they make me so angry, especially crack whore. Yeah, me too. I hate that one. Whether we're just chatting and then kind of just dropping these words, you have no idea what each person in that circle deals with, and what their family may be dealing with, or what a loved one may be dealing with. I actually did a presentation in a school one time and talked about how, although these are little kids that you're working with, you have to be careful as to how you portray and how you talk about these situations, because by the time kids are 7, 8, 9, 10, they know what's going on. And the way that you teach things, or the way that you begin conversations around these situations, and if you're using words like this, which I would hope that you're not, but if you are, that's really going to deter children and young teens from reaching out for them to realize that you're a safe person when you're throwing these words out, because you don't know what they're going home to. Paul, those all seem to speak to identity. It's not who they are, but sometimes what they do. Yes. As someone who lost their son to an accidental overdose, when people use these terms, it really hurts. Yeah, definitely. So does anyone else have any other thoughts around this? There's actually a book, Gabor Mate. It's one of my favorite books. I talk about it all the time. If you've seen any of my other presentations, then you know that I reference this a lot. But basically he talked about, because in his book he refers to individuals with substance use disorders as addicts. And by definition, that is what they are. And it's about reclaiming that definition. It's kind of like, I often compare it to the LGBTQ community reclaiming the label queer. It is who they are, how they identify. So they're trying to reclaim that, and it doesn't have to be a derogatory thing. It doesn't have to be like a shameful thing. Just like addict, I guess that kind of is what it is, But just because somebody's addicted to something doesn't make them an addict. It makes them a person with an addiction. It makes them a person who struggles with substances. Later on in a video that I'm going to show, I think it's myself or one of the other two people that are in the video that talk about all of our mental illness, our addiction, our job, our family, that not one of those things actually defines who we are. They're all just a part of who we are. And just like with mental health issues, we need to take the time to always put the person first. So someone with a substance use disorder, somebody with depression, not like just that one thing. When you call somebody schizophrenic or a schizo, that's not okay. It's not socially acceptable. So when it comes to addiction, why should we be constantly putting that first? And that was another thing that I really struggled with when I went and sat in on an AA meeting. It was about hi, my name is so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic. Well, there's a lot more to each individual. And I completely understand when people come in and say, well, that's what I am a junkie, or I am a hooker, or I am a crack whore. Well, when you're told something so much, you really do start to believe it. And maybe that's the only thing that they really think about themselves. Maybe they seem to forget that they're a funny person, that they're caring, that they are a mom, that they're a sister, a daughter, a brother, an uncle. And it's about having those conversations around, yeah, sure, you might be that, because who are we to tell people how they identify? Because none of us have that power over people. They can identify how they want, but it's about taking the time to talk to them about how there's so much more to them than just that one thing. So like, Abby is my label. I am Abby, but there's a lot more to me than just my mental health or my job or my relationship status, all of these things, what I do in my spare time. So it's about really taking the time to have those conversations with individuals. And when you first have that conversation, they're gonna be like, okay, this is weird, or I can say what I want. And yeah, that's fine. They can say what they want. But the more often they hear that and the more times that they get to be reminded of all these other things, maybe that's when something will really click. Okay, let's read some of these comments. He is awesome. What is his name? You guys are going to have to go back and help me out here. Oh, Gabor Mate. Yeah, he is wonderful. Actually, if you look in some of the materials that I sent out, I actually sent a chapter out of his book that's all on harm reduction. It really highlights harm reduction. When people say to me they are now clean, I tell them they were always clean unless they had forgotten to shower for a long time. Then we laugh. Yeah, definitely that. And that's one that I constantly am getting caught up with. Just while people are bringing their needles in and getting new ones. But once again, it's just about correcting yourself when you do it. Why do we have to say clean needles and dirty needles? Why can't we just say new needles and old needles, or new needles and used needles? And yeah, the whole clean and dirty thing. And when you first start to call them out on that, when they're talking, they do look at you very kind of like, are you out to lunch? But that's that's another situation that you're given to kind of elaborate on, you were clean yesterday? Did you have a shower this morning? Yeah. Habits are difficult to break, but not impossible. Exactly. So how can we address the stigma? Obviously, these are just 8 pretty simple, straightforward ideas, but of course, there's a lot of other things that we can do. So to start with is knowing the facts. I have a meeting at 3, wondering if I should stay or continue watching later to finish this. How are we for time? 3. I think I only have 3 more. Yeah, I'm just about done. But like I said earlier, Julie, I am recording this, so I'm hoping that I can figure out how to post and share it, so that you can catch the last bit if you would like. So how can we address the stigma? Knowing the facts, keeping up to date with information, as opposed to only going back to, like my mom says, they got that information out of a book that was on the Titanic. Keep up to date. If you're going to Google things, check more than one source. Wikipedia isn't really your best source. So check things out. Ask questions. Ask service providers. Ask our clients, obviously in a respectful way, but I find that when I take the time to ask clients and I want their opinion or I want their knowledge, they're really grateful for when I do that, because of the fact that they are the expert on things. They're the expert in their own lives. They're the experts in using, and yeah, they know a lot of a lot of things when it comes to the substances and things like that. Recognize addiction as a complex health issue, and that is not a choice. Be aware of your attitudes and behaviors. Sometimes it's really difficult, but like Matt's going to say later on in the video that I'm going to share, it might not be anything you say. It could literally just be your body language or your tone of voice or anything like that. Choosing your words carefully. So just being more aware of what you're saying, how you're saying it. Educate others, because just a little fun fact, not everything that you see on Facebook is actually factual information, and not everybody on Facebook are doctors. I'm not sure if anybody knew that, but I'm sorry to say that is the reality. I am not saying by any means that I have all the answers or that I'm a doctor or anything like that. But it just comes down to taking the time to actually trying to understand and be empathetic to our clients, and taking the time really to learn as much as you can. There's some really good courses. There's some really good books. Focus on the positive. So even if that is that so-and-so is still smoking crack, but at least he has his own hands to hold his pipe, that's a positive. Support people, and that's not just people that are using, that's their family members and loved ones, because although we lack services for people that are using, we have even less services for people that are affected by someone's substance use. So whether that be a parent or a sibling or a partner, or even a best friend for that matter, there's no supports in the city really, that for that group of people. I know that Horizon is working on having a new program open that will have a bit of incorporating significant others into their programming, which kind of leads into number 8. It's including everyone. So including the loved one that is helping support this individual, and just loves that individual, because as hard as it is and as mad as you get at an individual for their substance use or their behaviors, you still love them, and that's what takes a toll. So including everyone in discussions, in decisions, in policy making. A lot of people and organizations across Canada are using peers more often, so they have people working for them that is still using, that are still active in the sex trade, that are still actively using or selling or what have you. Because why should we decide what they need? We need to listen to what they want and what they know that they need. So seeing beyond the substance. So this is something that I'm super proud of. My coworker, Sarah, she was kind of behind, well, not kind of, she was behind the planning of this video. I was super grateful, and I still am, that I was able to take part in this actually as well. Now, once again, now I'm not sure if we'll be able to hear it or not, but I don't really know what to do to change that. So once again, if the volume isn't great, then let me know, and I'll try to make this resource available to you. If it's not, if you can't hear it, it's also called Seeing Beyond the Substance, and it's on YouTube, it's on our Facebook page. It's on our website as well.
So I'm Matthew Vaughn. I'm 28 years old, and I like to think of myself as a survivor of the overdose crisis, because my substance of choice was fentanyl, and I've been using for a long time, and I finally found a path of recovery. And I like to help people who use substances and kind of show them a message of hope, and that they're worth it, because for a long time, due to stigma, I didn't think that I was.
We as humans continually make choices every day that could put us into harm's way. Driving home, having sex, consuming coffee, trying a cigarette. That's just a human thing that we do. And it doesn't necessarily mean that we're all consciously thinking that something negative is going to come out of that, or harm is going to come out of that. We want to believe that it's not going to happen to us.
Addiction does not discriminate. You could be from a very good family, and you could be from a not so good family, or it doesn't. Nobody knows who's going to be affected. But just know it could happen to you.
Service providers have, the power to change people's lives, but if you have a negative impact on one, then you don't ever want to go back, and maybe you're sick and you won't even go to a walk-in clinic because of that one service provider that, called you a junkie, or said, I'm not treating you because, you're still using. You need to treat people like human beings, no matter what their past is, no matter if they just got out of jail, no matter if, they're using substances right now, they still need to be treated with respect and dignity, and just like you would treat, a family member or a colleague. You can be the one that will help them in their journey and on their pathway to recovery.
People only need to have that one person. It doesn't matter who they are. And literally anybody could be that person.
Every individual, I'm sure, that's out there that's struggling with a dependency is probably just waiting for someone just to be kind to them, to give them that little faint bit of hope.
Instead of using the words junkie and addict and, kind of those words that have like a negative ring to it, It's just a person that uses drugs or a person with a substance use disorder. So you're putting the person first and then putting the disease after, because those diseases are just one part to all of us. It's not our whole identity. It's not complete all of who we are. There's a lot more to us than our mental illness, our addiction, our job. Over time, you see that, okay, maybe these terms are kind of negatively affecting things, just like in any other aspect. So I can see how it's like, how all of you are seeing it, and it's really driving me nuts. So I'm not going to finish it, but I just put in the comments, and as you can see up in the top corner, it's called Seeing Beyond the Substance. So if you want to take the time to actually watch that, that would be great.
I just hope
So that really wraps up my presentation. I thank you all for sticking with me from the beginning to the end. Like I said, this was the first time that I have done this. I'm hoping that all of you take the time to do the evaluation that you'll see in your on your screen once I close the presentation. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, definitely feel free to reach out through email, through our phone, a phone call. And I'm also really looking forward to seeing some of you or all of you tomorrow. And once again, that's a training that's happening at 6 o'clock. If you can't make it right for 6 o'clock, that's cool, because some of the stuff that's going to be right at the beginning is some of the stuff that was in this presentation. So if you're not there for 6, that's all right. Still come. Yeah. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful evening. Bye.